All right, I think I am live and we've got someone who's already joined. Hi, Miss Danny. Hope you are well. So, today, happy Sunday. Very excited to chat to you guys today. So, if you are a recent or new subscriber, hello, how are you? I tend to do these YouTube lives once a month, or I try to at least, and it's just a chance for us to chat. You can ask me questions. Please do ask me any questions, especially in terms of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. So you can, of course, let me know in the chat. Hopefully, you can join me live. And if you ever do need further one-to-one support, I am also a money coach as well. So if you are ever interested in trying to get in check with your finances and need that support, you can book a call via the link below. So all information will be down there. So it's nice to see some of you guys. I know a couple of you guys have joined already. But in today's live, I want to talk about inflation. I want to talk about everything that's going on, and hopefully you can hear me okay, and hopefully the internet's all okay as well. But I want to talk about, what you should be doing with your money during periods of high inflation, what I'm going to be doing with my money. Obviously, I can't really tell you what to do exactly with your money, but I can give you some tips, some recommendations, things to think about. So in this live, what I kind of want to talk about is, what exactly is inflation? Let's just make sure that everyone understands that. We can talk about, what you should be doing with your spending. If you've got any debt, what you should be doing with that, what to do with your savings, and then also what you should be doing when it comes to investing as well. So very, very excited. Hello. Abdullah says, yes, thanks for hopefully you're doing well. I am doing well, thank you. It's been a nice Sunday. The weather is still quite nice today. So yeah, I just want to get into it because we've got quite a few people joining us already. So let's talk about inflation because that has been a big topic on the news. Hey Kuri, yep, hope everyone's doing okay. Let us know in the chat as well, like how your Sunday is going. What have you been up to? Have you got any questions? Let us know. We are a community, so we are here to chat and get to know each other. But let's talk about inflation because yeah, it's a hot topic. Everyone keeps talking about it. Really and truly, when I hear it on the news, some people don't necessarily know what it actually means. So I'm going to debunk that and make sure you understand exactly what we mean by inflation and not what just the news is telling us. So when we're talking about inflations, I think most people kind of understand inflation to be, prices rising. So things just getting more expensive, and that's what inflation is. That's what happens. Whilst that is partly true, what most people don't realize is the big cause of inflation, why we tend to have so much inflation, is because we will have a larger supply of money in the system. And that's what causes prices to go up. So if we have more money in the system, that's going to create a bit more demand because you've obviously got more people with more money. And if the supply, so if the amount of goods and services hasn't changed, well, then that's when prices have to go up. And that's what we've been seeing. So when it comes to inflation, a big reason why we've had all of this high inflation, because actually inflation is usually normal. The government does try to, I would say the central banks actually likes to have a bit of inflation. Usually we'll have inflation of about 2%. But recently, especially if you're in the UK, it's been about 9%, like in the US, about 8%. So it's been quite high this time. And the reason being is because we have more money in the system. But many people don't realize that. Many people think that the reason why we have a lot of inflation is because, we've had supply chain issues because of the pandemic, and obviously we have the war. Whilst that is true, one of the biggest reasons why we have inflation and why it's so high at this point in time is because we have so much money in the system. And we have so much money in the system because central banks printed money out of thin air and gave it to us. That is one of the big, that's like the basically, I think that's the main cause of inflation. Yes, there's the war. Yes, there's the supply chain issues. But usually when inflation happens, it's because of the supply of money that you have. And because we had the pandemic and because, people were struggling, people needed money, businesses were struggling. What the central bank had to do is because they had no money, like because governments didn't have money, they had to print out money out of thin air. So when they printed out that money, and I tell my clients this, it's literally like you telling me that you need to borrow money off me because the government and the central bank. So, for example, if you're in the UK, it's the Bank of England. If you're in the US, it's the Fed. The government and the central banks are supposed to be two separate entities, right? So they're supposed to be two separate entities. The government is the one that will spend money, right? So, and how they make money is from taxes, right? So whether you're in the UK, you're in the US, or wherever else, they make money from your taxes. But what the government has been doing is that they've been spending more money than they're making. So they've been spending more money than the income they have, right? It's like a normal person. Like if I spend more than I make, what am I going to do? I'm going to borrow the money, right? I'm going to go into debt to essentially pay for that lifestyle. That's essentially what the government was doing. They were either having to borrow money or they were having to go to the central bank and say, look, we need more money. The central bank does not have money. What they do is they look after like the amount of money in the system, but they don't necessarily have money. So what they were doing is they were just printing money out of thin air. So it's literally like you telling me, oh, Veronia, can I just borrow £50 or $50 from you? I don't have that money. I don't have it. But what I'm going to do is I'll say, yeah, sure. And then I'll just type in on my phone, £50 or dollars and send it to you. I've just created money out of thin air. Now, obviously, I can't do that because that would be illegal. But that's what the central banks have been doing. And not many people understand that. And so what happened with during the pandemic is obviously because our economy was shrinking, because people couldn't spend money, you couldn't leave the house, businesses weren't making money, and there was obviously like a lot of stuff going on, and we would have probably gone into quite a deep recession. What the central banks had to do is they printed out a lot of money, like they were printing trillions, right? And they were doing different things. They were buying back government bonds, for example. They were giving it out. They were giving the money. What they would do is, in terms of the government, is they were giving it in the form of like stimulus checks. So, for example, in the US, you maybe got like a $600 stimulus check because they wanted to encourage you to spend money. Because we are basically, especially if you're in a Western country, we are in how our economy works is based on like spending and also credit as well. Like a lot of people will take on debt. So because of how our economy works, what we need to do is what governments want us to do is spend money. Because when we spend that money, governments will make money. Not governments, businesses will make money. And when businesses make money, they then have more money to either invest back in their business. So they may hire more employees. And so if more employees are hired, they obviously now have more money to spend. And then obviously those people will spend money, businesses will make more money, they'll be able to grow more, right? So that's kind of how like a lot of Western economies work. So why I'm kind of giving you this backstory is because during the pandemic, obviously because people weren't spending money because people were at home, or they were spending money online, for example, but they weren't spending money in other stores, that meant that those businesses were not making money. So because those businesses weren't making money, they had to lay off their employees, right? A lot of employees got made redundant because they weren't making money because they didn't have cash. And so what the government had to come in to do is literally give like stimulus checks to encourage people to spend money. In the UK, we had things like the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. They did that so that they wanted you to go and spend money so that businesses could then make money, right? So that's all what happened. But in terms of the money they were giving us, they didn't have it. Like they didn't have it. And so because they didn't have it, they had to go to the central bank, and the central bank doesn't obviously have money. So the central bank had to print the money out of thin air. So then you had all of this money in the system because it was given to businesses, it was given to the people. You had all of this money in the system. And so when you have a higher supply of money, inflation is going to happen. Like it's inevitable, right? So people that knew that this was happening, they knew that inflation was going to be here. They knew this was going to happen. They just didn't know to what extent, right? So we didn't know to what extent inflation would be this high. Like, I don't think people envisioned that it would be 8 or 9%. And in the UK, it may even go to 11% by October, right? We had no idea that this was going to happen. But many people did know that inflation was going to happen, like we were going to have high levels of inflation. So when people are talking about inflation, yes, the prices are going up, but one of the biggest reasons is because we have so much money in the system. But people don't necessarily understand that. And even when I'm watching the news and they're talking about supply chain issues, yeah, there are some supply chain issues, but that's not the main cause. That's not one of the biggest causes. The biggest causes is because we have so much money in the system. And so it's important for you to understand that, so you can understand, okay, well, what does that mean going forwards? What does that mean with your money going forwards, especially because we have all of this money in the supply. So hopefully that kind of makes sense in terms of, you know, what inflation is and how it's kind of come about and why we have all this high inflation. If you do have questions, let me know. Just let me know in the chat. So Kuri says, I wonder why enough attention is not brought on regarding money in the system. Kuri, it's a very interesting question. Would you do you think central banks and the government would want most people to know that the reason that inflation has been caused is because of them? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Got to ask yourself that. Would they want people to know? Do they want the majority of people to know that? Probably not. Probably not. So what they'll do is, you know, and I'm not even talking from a political stance, but you can see that, you know, they're blaming it a lot on the supply chain issues and the war and things like that. But they haven't necessarily said, oh, it's because we printed out a whole load of money. And one of the things that I didn't mention is they had to print out so much money because interest rates were already really low. So usually, if we know that we're going to head into a recession, or if we are in a recession, central banks will try to lower interest rates. And the reason why they do that is because they want to make borrowing cheaper. And if borrowing's cheaper, more people are likely to say, okay, interest rates are down, I'm going to go now and buy a house because things like the interest rate's cheaper, or I'm going to borrow money for a business, for example. So that's what usually will happen. But we'd got to the point where they'd cut interest rates from so low from 2008. And so because of that, they didn't really have any choice because they didn't have money. They'd already cut interest rates. So the only option was to print out money. That was it. So it's really it's a really interesting factor in terms of, you know, how inflation has been brought, and, you know, the fact that, you know, people don't necessarily talk about that. But I wanted to share it with you guys because I always make sure that, like, my clients understand where this inflation is coming from, so that you kind of understand, okay, actually, you know, this can happen again in the future, and so you want to make sure that you're best prepared for that. So that's just the background in terms of inflation. Again, if you've got questions, let me know. But what I want to talk about is, you know, what you should be doing, or what you might want to think about doing when it comes to your spending, debt, savings, and investments as well. So let's talk about spending. And I think for me, I would just say that, you know, whether we're in a period of high inflation or not, you want to be able to understand how to spend much more intentionally. So if whether we're in a recession, whether we have high inflation, I think it's really important to learn how to spend intentionally. Like, I never tell people don't spend your money, but what I say is learn how to spend intentionally. And what I mean by that is questioning, are you spending money on the right things? Are you spending money on things that are going to help you or that are going to bring you joy, for example? Or are you kind of just spending money just willy-nilly for no reason? And then you kind of feel guilty for spending that money, and then you end up spending even more money. They're two different things, right? Like I always say, there's a difference between spending your money and overspending. Like, you would know if you're overspending compared to if you're just spending money normally. But I think this is going to be even more important. Hey, Integrated Purgatory, how are you doing? So I'm just talking about spending money at the moment, but what I'm saying is it's going to be even more important now because things are much more expensive. So you want to be really questioning, you know, when I spend money, am I being quite intentional with it? Is it something that I genuinely want to spend money on? Or am I just leaking cash? Because they're two different things. So whilst things are more expensive, and this is why having a budget is going to be even more important, you just want to figure out, okay, well, where is my money going? And where do I think it should be going, right? So I'm not saying don't stop spending, 100%. But what I'm saying is make sure you're just spending based on what you actually enjoy and what you actually care about, especially because things are getting more expensive. So you just want to be a bit mindful of that. Okay, so that's kind of my thoughts on spending. And of course, if you've got questions, let me know. So when it comes to paying off debt, so when it comes to any forms of debt, so here's my stance on it, especially if we are in a high inflationary period, but also because central banks have been increasing rates. So across the world, but I know, specifically in the US and the UK, the central banks have been increasing rates, and they will probably do that in the future as well, because they're now trying to fight off inflation, right? So you've maybe seen in the news where it may have gone up by like 0.5%, 0.75%. That is probably going to happen in the future if the central banks believe that they still need to do it to fight off inflation. So when it comes to interest rates, that could have an impact on some of the rates that you pay on your debt. So for example, when it comes to your mortgage debt, most likely if you have a mortgage, if you're not on a fixed deal, you may have seen that your mortgage rates have maybe gone up. The same with, there's maybe not a clear link between things like credit card debt, but you may find that your credit card debt, the interest on your credit card may increase, just because the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve have been increasing interest rates. And so my stance on is, if you can pay off any high interest debt, I would try and do that as quickly as possible. Obviously, it's a little bit hard considering that things are getting more expensive, but if you've got any spare cash, I would try to pay off that debt, because it's going to become more expensive, because the higher they push interest rates, the more expensive your debt is going to become. So that's what you would want to think about. So in terms of high interest debt, think about just trying to pay that off as soon as possible. I do have videos on how you can potentially pay off your debt, because I used to be in debt. If you didn't know, if you're new to my channel, I used to be in debt. I had about £16,000, $22,000 worth of debt, and I was able to pay that off in about 18 months with a few sacrifices, but it can be done. But obviously, it's going to be a little bit more difficult in this inflationary environment. So just be really mindful. And again, like, this is why having a budget, and I know there's always negative connotations about having a budget. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen that I did a reel just talking about, I don't understand why we bash budgeting so much. It's not the budget itself that's the problem. It's your thoughts around budgeting. If you think that budgeting is there to just make sure you cut everything out and you're supposed to be miserable, then of course, like, that's the result of the budget, right? But if you have thoughts that the budget is literally there to help you understand where your money is going, they're two different things. So that's why, in terms of having a budget, it's going to help you lay out, okay, where, in terms of how things are getting more expensive, where is my money going? Like, where's the majority of my money going? And are there things that I can do to change it so that I can free up cash to pay off debt, for example, in this case, right? So yeah, those are my thoughts on debts. But yeah, let me know if you've got any question. Hey, free trade to financial freedom. Hope you are doing well. Always try to purchase everything via cash if you can afford it. Yeah, buy everything on credit can be very risky. Yeah, so when it comes to, so I have thoughts on, like, using a credit card versus credit card debt. I have a credit card and I use my credit card, but I have never been in credit card debt. Like, it just won't happen. So you really have to know yourself when it comes to purchasing things. Are you likely to land yourself in debt? Then for me personally, I would steer away. But if you're someone like me, where you're very intentional, when you know that you're going to pay off your card 100% all the time, then yeah, that's something that you could potentially do. But yeah, you really have to know yourself. Yeah, budgeting is life-changing. Yeah, never look back. Like, I love my budget. I find it fun, personally. Someone asked, does anyone know how long it might take for inflation to settle? It might be a silly question. It's definitely not a silly question. The truth is, no one will know. If someone tells you that they know, be mindful. that's what I will say. What I will say, in my point of view, is I believe that we may be entering into a higher inflationary environment than before. So especially if you're a millennial, you're probably used to us just having inflation by like 2%. That's not always been the case, right? Or we've not always had interest rates at like 2 to 3%. That's not always been the case. So I would not be surprised if we do enter a period where we do have high levels of inflation where it will probably be higher than, you know, the standard 2% that we may have been used to. That's my thoughts. So I don't know. I don't know, but those are kind of my thoughts. So, you know, you've got a, but no one knows. No one knows at the end of the day. You know, things could absolutely change, but that's my initial thought. So in terms of paying off debt, those are my thoughts. Yeah, the rail strikes. Yeah, luckily I work from home, so yeah, you know, I'm very thankful and blessed to be able to work from home. But yeah, if you're in the UK, those rail strikes, yeah. But you know, obviously you a big reason for that is obviously due to pay. Like a lot of people, I think they don't realize that finances are such a big part of our lives. And I think when things like this happen, you realize how much finances are so important. So when things become more expensive, you're like, oh, things are much more expensive. I now need to look at my spending, whereas maybe people weren't doing that before. And so that's why it's so important, you know, no matter what situation we're in, is to really think about your finances, really understand, you know, do I actually have a budget? Do I understand my numbers? Do I understand how much I'm spending? Because that's going to be very important when we have periods like this, or when, if we do enter into a recession, if we are in a recession now, for example, it's really important to prioritize controlling your finances and really understanding how that works. So yeah. All right, so let's talk about savings. As you guys know, I feel like I'm the queen of saving. I'm just going to put that out there. I think I'm the queen of saving, but let's talk about saving because that's always an interesting topic. So for me, when it comes to saving, I will say one of the biggest things is you want to think about having a cushion. So I tend to call it an emergency fund. You can call it grandma's rainy day fund. I don't care what you call it, but having some cash is going to be important, especially if we are in a recession. Like we may be in a recession now, we don't know. We'll probably find out probably next month, but having some form of an emergency fund is going to be really important. And I did a video this past Tuesday on emergency funds, what to think about when it comes to emergency funds, especially during this time. But it's going to be very important because if we do end up being in a recession, that obviously has an impact on people's incomes, right? If you are in a recession, people aren't likely to spend as much money, or they won't necessarily spend money on you know, discretionary things, like things that, you know, are nice to have. They're less likely to spend money on that. And if that happens, those businesses could struggle because they're not going to be making much money. And also some businesses don't have emergency funds either, right? That's why in the pandemic, I was so shocked. Well, I wasn't really shocked, but I was kind of shocked that so many businesses ended up laying off their employees literally within the month. The month hadn't even ended when we found out the pandemic happened, and you had companies laying off their employees left, right, and center. A big reason for that is because they didn't have an emergency fund. They did not have savings, right? So it's very similar to how you deal with your personal finances. You would expect to at least have some savings just to cushion the blow, just in case anything happens to your income, right? So if you don't have an emergency fund, I would try to work on that now. Again, obviously it is a little bit difficult when things are getting more expensive, but sometimes you'll be surprised at how much you can save if you really put your mind to it. Like if you genuinely put your mind to it, you'll be surprised at how much you can potentially save. So if you can, I would try and get that emergency fund sorted. Obviously it's up to you, like how much savings you want to have. Some people are very comfortable with 3 months worth of expenses. Some people may want a year's. Again, I have a video that talks about that in so much more detail. So just visit my channel and you should see it basically near the top. So just try and see if you can have any savings. Any other things when it comes to saving, I will also say if you are trying to save up for things in the short term. So it could be that you're saving up for a car. It could be maybe you're saving up for a house maybe in the next couple of years. That again, you know, you still want to see if you can try to save money. Like at the moment, we're still saving. We're saving up for a holiday, and we're also going to be saving up for a property as well. So that's still something that is on our mind. As long as we still have consistent income coming in, that's still something that we're going to be doing. So you want to still think about anything in the short term, you know, even in this environment. So, and also actually, before I forget, especially if you are in the UK, where our utility bills could skyrocket in October. If you can have some cash set aside just to cushion that blow as well, I would try to do it now. I know the government's going to try and help us by sending like some money for us. Again, where's that money coming from? They don't have the money, but that's a different conversation. But also at the same time, you know, try and, you know, get some cash aside just so that when it comes to October, even if our utility bills go up, at least you have some money to still kind of, you know, bridge the gap. And so it doesn't completely stop you from moving towards your financial goals. So really kind of think about that, especially during the summer when we're not maybe using as much energy. If you're not using as much energy, really try and see if you can potentially use some of that cash just to set aside for October, because that's kind of what we've done as well. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, any other short-term things, you definitely want to think about that. Yes, especially the elephant in the room, credit scores, they're so important. Yeah, no one knows how they work. Yeah, I mean, I should probably do like a video update on credit scores, because that's really important if you are trying to buy a house, for example. If you're trying to take out a mortgage, that's going to be important. So I will try and make a note to do a video on that in the future. I was comfortable with 3 months. Now we're working towards 6 months. The economy is really affecting my perception of risk tolerance. Yeah. It's a really good point. Exactly. It will. So, and that's why, like, especially when I talk to my clients about emergency funds, there is no one size fits all, because you have to also question yourself. If we were in a recession, for example, what kind of industry am I in, right? So am I in the type of work where I'll probably be able to still find work very easily? Like, is my industry quite stable? So for example, if I take myself and my husband's case, my husband, he works in the public sector. And so for him, his job is actually really important, and it's kind of unlikely that he would lose his job. So for us, that changes how much we may view our emergency fund. Whereas for myself, like the industry that I'm in, so when I was working in HR, it is important, but depending on the company that I work in, they may just lay off employees like that. But I am in a specialized field where it's still very important. So that then has an impact on how much we think we will need for an emergency fund, because we can then have a bit of a buffer, knowing that, you know, we're in particular industries that could still weather the storm, essentially. So that's kind of other things that you want to be thinking about when it comes to your emergency fund, and make sure it is what you're comfortable with. You know, you don't just need to go for the 3 months because everyone says 3 months. No, you have to do what's comfortable for you. Like, that's everything. Like I say, and everything I say to my clients, I'm always like, just do what's comfortable for you. If you feel comfortable with 6 months, then go with 6 months. If you're fine with 3 months, then go with 3 months. So yeah, really think about your risk tolerance there. But yeah, that's probably one of the most important things I would do when it comes to saving. Of course, I do have so many saving videos as well. So if you ever are looking at ways to save money, I am also trying to film a updated grocery haul, because obviously things have been a bit more expensive. So I kind of just want to show you guys, you know, what we've been buying as well, what we've been doing with our money, how much we've been spending on food. But you can see that in our budget videos anyway. But just to give you an idea, just to see if there's anything that you guys can take out of that. So hopefully I will do a video very soon. I just need to make sure that it's planned in my calendar, but hopefully that will help. So any questions to do with saving? If not, I'm going to move over to investing, what you should be doing when it comes to investing. So even though I'm like a huge advocate when it comes to saving money, I'm a huge advocate for also saving money to invest as well, because I think they're also important. Like, yes, you want to be able to save money for like things like your emergency fund and any short-term goals, any short-term things, maybe within the next couple of years. But if you're now thinking about your future, so if you're thinking about, you know, within the next decade or so, then you do really want to think about investing. And it's so important now, because your cash is worth less when you have high inflation. So whilst there is all this high inflation going on, your cash, like your money in your savings account, is not growing at the same rate. So for example, at the moment, inflation is what, 8 to 9%. If your savings is still 0.75% or it's gone up to 1%, that difference means that you're technically losing money, and that you can end up losing a lot of money over time. So that's why, yes, saving is great, but you also want to start thinking about investing if you're in a position to do so, right? If you be done, being very clear, if you are paying credit card debt and you're paying 15% or 20% interest to your credit card company, personally, I would not be investing yet. That's personally, I can't give you financial advice, but personally, I wouldn't, because when it comes to investing, yes, it's important, but also investing has risk, and you're not always guaranteed to make money at a certain time, right? So let's say that you're able to make a 10% return on your investments, that's great, but if you're paying 15% to your credit card company, it makes no sense, because you're technically losing money, and that investing, that 10% isn't guaranteed, right? So it's very important to understand where you currently are, right? So for me, I didn't start investing until I paid off debt. I personally had at least an emergency fund. I had like some type of emergency fund first, and then after that, I started investing. So it really depends on the stage that you're at. But if you're in a position where, let's say, you have a solid emergency fund and you're already thinking about, investing for your future, or you're thinking about your future, then of course investing is going to be really important, because as I mentioned, you know, especially if we are in a period of high inflation for the next few years, your cash is going to be worth a lot less. So it is really important to consider that for your future. So again, investing is I think of investing as something that's very long term. There is a difference between investing and trading. Trading is very short term. I don't do that. I invest. When I'm investing, I'm not looking to pull that money out for at least 5 years. That's what I mean by investing. Like it is long term. And in terms of how inflation works, we pretty much have had inflation all the time. Like that's probably not going to go away. And so because we have all of this inflation, it's actually really important to consider investing for the long term, because over time your money is going to be worth a lot less. So that's why you do want to be thinking about it. And especially if you're trying to become like financially independent, if you want to do any of that stuff, you'll obviously want to consider investing. I like it, honestly, to be honest, it doesn't really matter what you want to invest in. There are so many different asset classes. You can invest in companies, so you can invest in stocks. They're also known as equities. You could invest in real estate, so property. You can invest in that. You can also invest in your own business as well. That is also how some people build wealth. There are also commodities, so things like cryptocurrencies, gold, silver. These are all different asset classes that you can invest in. So there's no like one size fits all. There are different things that you can invest in. I teach my clients how to invest in the stock market just because you don't need a lot of money to get started. Like you literally for in terms of some investment accounts, you can literally get started with like £1 or like a couple of dollars. Like you don't need that much money to get started, and it's quite easy to get started as well. So that's why I help them with that. But you don't have to do the stock market if you don't want to. I also have an interest in real estate. I would love to get into real estate one day. So there are other things, but I also invest in the stock market as well, because that was a good way for me to get started. So the one thing that I did want to say about investing is you do have to understand how investing works, because right now a lot of people invested in the pandemic when there was a bull run. So after we had a stock market crash in the pandemic, and then after the stock market rallied, a lot of people started investing their money, but they didn't necessarily understand how investing actually works. But because they made so much money, they got excited and then kept investing more money and investing in things that they maybe don't understand. And now that we have a bear market, which basically means that the markets are now going down, now people are panicking. So when you're investing, really make sure you understand what you're investing in. Don't just invest in like one company because like everyone's like, yeah, this company is amazing. That same company could literally be down like 50% the next year. So you have to be very clear in what you're investing in. You have to have your own criteria. You have to look at your own personal goals, right? That's why I never tell people, you should invest in this type of fund or you should invest in this company, because I don't know your goals. I don't know what you're trying to invest in. I also don't know your risk tolerance as well, right? So how comfortable are you at taking risk? People didn't necessarily do that like over the last few years. Like I've seen people invest in companies that are probably considered high risk, but they don't realize that that they maybe shouldn't have maybe they shouldn't have invested in that company because now that company is down like 70%. And if you can't stomach that, if you can't stomach a 70% fall in your portfolio, you have to question whether you should be investing in certain companies, or whatever you're investing in, you have to question that, right? So it's really important to take that into consideration, take your risk tolerance into consideration, right? But what I will say is when it comes to investing, especially during the market that we're in, and especially during the high inflation, because so many people are panicking, that could bring out opportunities as well, right? Because people just they have no idea what's going on. If you understand what's going on, you can use that as an opportunity, and you could really set yourself out for a great future if you know what you're doing and if you take advantage of that opportunity, right? So like even some of my clients, they're wanting to invest more even during this time where people are trying to sell their investments, because they know how markets work, right? They eventually believe we're going to recover, and so they're just trying to invest as much for their future. Like that's what they're trying to do. So the one tip I would give is make sure you're doing your research. Understand what you're investing in, guys. Please don't just put your money into things that you just don't even know or you just don't understand. Really be clear on what you're investing in, because that's going to help you when things turn, or if the market goes down, that's going to help you, and you're going to be able to understand what's going on, and you can then take advantage of that. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if you do have any questions when it comes to investing. Yep, I've been longing for a grocery haul. Yeah, I know, I definitely need to do that. What account would you recommend for saving? I don't tend to really recommend savings accounts because honestly, I don't really look at the interest rate. I mean, if you go on, if you're in the UK, you can go on Money Saving Expert. They will usually have savings accounts by the interest rate as well. So, but it's the interest rate is, it's not much, is it? It's still not much. So for me, I just for me personally, like the account we use is like the one that we've been using for ages. And I honestly don't look at the interest rate because I know that it's not going to be much anyway. Like I use my savings for like insurance when it comes to emergency funds, or if I've got something like short term, that's what I'll use my savings for. But again, if you're looking for something very long term, like if you're looking for something for like within the next, 7+ years, then, that's when you want to start thinking about investing, especially during all of this high inflation. But that's pretty much what I wanted to share today. Any questions? I've got time. I've got a couple of minutes for questions before I go off to dinner. I hope this was helpful as well. Would you prioritize savings, emergency funds / sinking funds over investing given the circumstances? Yeah, so I would definitely say it depends on what you are also saving for. So what I tend to say is, if there's anything that like for example with sinking funds, and for those of you who don't know, sinking funds are just, expenses that they're going to come up over time, or they're going to come up within, let's say, the next year. So that you're going to have to pay for them. With that, I would make sure you have money for that, because you're going to have to pay for them anyway, right? Like if I knew that I had to pay for my car insurance next year, I'm probably going to prioritize that first. Or with like an emergency fund, personally, I would focus on an emergency fund just because of the current situation, especially if that potentially if your income could change. I would like to have the security of having that emergency fund. Some people choose not to. Some people will do half and half. Some people will invest half and then they'll build their emergency fund. The reason why I prefer to build my emergency fund first is because if it gets to a point where, let's say you're in a recession and God forbid you ended up losing your job, if you had invested all that money, but at the same time the markets go down, you will have no choice. If you need the money, you'll either end up going into debt because you'll have to borrow money, or you'll end up having to sell those investments at a loss. So for me, that's why I personally, again, can't tell people what to do with their money, but I will personally save up for the emergency fund first, because then I know that I have the security. So worst case scenario, if I lost my job, I wouldn't have to touch my investments, right? I would at least be able to live on that cash. So that's why, like for me personally, I would save up for the emergency fund and any sinking funds that you know are going to come up that you're essentially going to have to pay for at the moment. Like that's kind of what we are doing like at the moment, because we knew that we were traveling this year, so we during this summer we're prioritizing that. And then also we're also going to be saving up. Like we did do a lot of investing the first half of the year, but yeah, so it really depends on sort of your priorities and what you're trying to save up for. Have you added new sinking funds? I don't think so. I don't, not from our budget. I think at the moment, most of our sinking funds are probably going towards like either our car maintenance, or if my husband's got rugby, we put money towards that, and the dentist, and just other just random stuff. Skincare as well. We had a sinking fund for skincare, random stuff. Majority of it is going towards like the holiday though. Like that's probably the newest sinking fund we have, because I've not been on holiday in so long. So yeah, even during this time, I'm still going to travel, but obviously we're in a good financial position to do so, which is great. Cool. Any other questions? I hope this was useful as well. I hope this was useful, guys. But please do let me know if there are any questions. I'm eyeballing the tickets at the moment and they are through the roof. Yeah, honestly, we were very lucky in that we purchased our tickets before things got really, really expensive. Like we'd bought it sort of earlier this year, because now I've been looking through the tickets and I'm pretty sure like some of it is like 50% more than what we paid for. So yeah, we're very, very lucky. But I'm a planner. I like to plan things very quickly, very early on. If I left it to my husband, he would not have done that. He'd probably be looking now to figure out, how, like, figure out our holiday. But no, for me, I'm very much a planner. So yeah, I'm very happy about that. Cool. Well, if there's no questions, I'm going to leave it there because we're going to have dinner. As I mentioned, if you ever need one-to-one support, particularly when it comes to either saving or investing or budgeting or anything like that, you can, of course, book a call with me so you can learn more about my one-on-one coaching. But yeah, if you've got any other questions, on Tuesday, I should have a video coming out about saving, actually. So it's been a while since I also did a saving video. So I've got a video all about that to help you save a bit more money, especially during this time. But yeah, guys, I hope that was useful. It was nice to see 15 of you on this call. But yeah, if you've got any sort of other questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram at Veronia Spain. I do more content on there as well, and you can chat to me there as well. Fabulous. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Hope you guys all have a great evening or day, depending on where you're based. And we will speak soon. See you later. Bye.